Depersonalization and derealization are these very peculiar psychological syndromes. Uh, Derealization is when you have a sense of things being unreal or fake somehow, almost as though you're in a movie instead of real life. Depersonalization is a particular kind of derealization where you feel that your own self is unreal. You feel alienated from your own self. The first time I experienced what I later realized was depersonalization or derealization, as far as I can remember, it was one of my first memories ever when I was a little kid. So I was walking through woods with some friends, and I suddenly had a sense of my own self as being very strange. It was almost as though I stepped out of myself. And I was just a little kid. I was about 5 years old. And I stepped out of myself and saw myself as this peculiar thing. I'd never had this feeling before, so it was very unsettling. And I remember that I actually stopped in this path in the woods and I said, "I am me." And I repeated that several times. And I had a couple of friends with me and they were looking at me like, "Well, what are you doing? Just let's keep going." And I didn't realize until much later that this feeling I had was a thing that people have that actually has a name, depersonalization. And then it turned out that I had this sort of feeling many times after that in my childhood and continuing right up until pretty much the present. When I was a kid, I had it pretty often, especially when I was under stress. So typically it would be, I remember once I was interviewing to go to a private school. And so I was talking to a person in admissions. This must have been when I was I think maybe 14 years old. My parents were sitting behind me. And so, I was in the spotlight and I was talking to this person across the desk, the head of admissions for this school. And I suddenly had this intense feeling of unreality accompanied by a kind of tunnel effect. So I felt as though everything sort of shrank. It was a much more extreme and dramatic version of what I'd felt before. I had various experiences like that, especially in my just before I became a teenager, and then in my early teens. As I said, often when it was a kind of stressful situation. I have always had stage fright, starting when I was a little kid, and when I feel like I'm the center of attention, often I have these feelings. And what I remember about that particular situation is that then it's as though part of me steps outside of myself and I'm looking at myself from the outside. And what was weird was that I kept talking and I was doing pretty well. I think in the interview I was performing, but part of me was on the outside watching and going, who is that person? There's something really strange about this whole situation. I was looking at myself as though I wasn't myself, as though I was an actor. Usually there's a period of it doesn't last that long where it's really intense, but there can be after effects and it can linger for a long time. So, and then, I was growing up in the 60s. So I was also smoking pot. I was taking psychedelic drugs, and that could really amplify the feeling of derealization, depersonalization. The symptoms felt when I was young because they were so novel and they were more intense. Um, they were frightening, and they made me feel distant from other people and from the world and from my own life. So they weren't a good thing. I don't have extreme experiences very often as an adult. I sometimes get them I used to get them sometimes when I did public speaking. I've been interviewed for television programs. And so if it's a really artificial situation and I'm, again, the center of attention, sometimes I have those feelings. Not nearly as intense as when I was a kid. Now um, I'm more used to them, and I actually have learned to cherish them a little bit. But also because the feelings are milder. And so it's almost more of an intellectual feeling now, whereas it used to be really visceral and physical in a way that sometimes was hard to handle. On the other hand, I have kind of a free floating sense of life being unreal all the time. I write about this a lot. I call it the weirdness. So it just means that uh, I see life as really strange. I feel alienated from it to a certain extent, and also alienated from myself. But it doesn't bother me so much anymore. And in fact, I've convinced myself that this is the way we should see reality, because reality really is bizarre. It's infinitely improbable. I've been convinced of this by reading philosophy and science, and I've just gotten used to the feeling, I guess. And I've convinced myself that I'm seeing things as they really are. I mean, it's part of who you are. You realize after a while, and it's something that you can see as a gift. If you walk through life and you don't see yourself and the world as strange, I think you're missing something. So I'm a science writer, but I write a lot about philosophy and spirituality. So I have written actually quite a bit about derealization and depersonalization because they are related to these very deep issues that come up in science and philosophy and mysticism, related to what reality is. How much do we know about the world? How much can we know ourselves? Uh, and the feelings I've had that the world is strange and that I'm strange, I think, have led directly to me being curious about what is really going on. What is existence? What is real? Is this world that we're in now, is it really just um, a cover for something much deeper, which is an idea that comes up in a lot of mystical and philosophical traditions. And I think it's an idea also that physics and some other sciences point to. So actually, I'm very fortunate. I have written about this quite a bit, and I've heard from other people who have shared their experiences of feeling that reality isn't reality, and also having a sense of estrangement from their own selves. And of course, that's wonderful because then you don't feel so alone in these feelings. And I think that's one of the problems with having these sorts of experiences when you're young. You feel like nobody else has felt this way before, and you don't even know how to talk about it to other people. So I'm not in that situation anymore. I suspect a lot of people have had these experiences, but sometimes they're not sure what to call them. They don't know how to describe them even to themselves, let alone to other people. But if you tell them about the experiences, then they will recognize them. So I think they actually are much more common than even the psychiatric literature might estimate, but that people don't even know that they have it. I think everybody has at least occasional feelings of estrangement from the world and from themselves, but sometimes they don't dwell on them, or they think it's disturbing, they shouldn't feel this way, and so they try to get past it as quickly as possible. But again, if you sort of describe it to them, then they go, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've had that." I actually dwell on it now. I like it. I like the feeling. I've decided that one of the problems that we have as humans is what you might call habituation. We get used to life. We take it for granted. And so the feelings of unreality, which are just kind of a feeling of strangeness, of the weirdness of the world, that's cutting through our habituation. And to me, it means you're seeing the world more clearly. So I actually like it now. It still can be associated with anxiety and dread. You sort of, everything feels a little wobbly. But I've had these feelings for so long that it doesn't bother me as much as it used to. And I have convinced myself that this is the way we should see things. And by the way, there is this tradition in mysticism and philosophy which says that all of this world, this is kind of like the Matrix. It's not real. And our goal as spiritual seekers or philosophers should, or science writers, should be to try to see the reality behind this. And that if you can see the reality, if you can go through that initial feeling of derealization, then maybe that's where truth is and enlightenment. So that's another reason for being grateful for these kinds of feelings. It can be exhausting to have these feelings that everything is unreal and you don't know what the ground of being is. And so I'm happy to go back to my normal habituated state and seeing and taking things for granted for a while. But I'm always happy to get back to feelings of derealization. And then because I'm a writer, I have the opportunity to write about it. And writing about it is a whole nother part of the process that also helps me come to terms with the experience and make sense of it and try to make it something meaningful for myself. I think even people who aren't professional writers, I would urge them to write about their experiences as a way to describe them to themselves and to try to find some kind of meaning or truth in them. And I think that would also help to make the feelings, to get on top of them, to make them a little less disturbing and to integrate them into your own life. Other than that, I would just try to, if it's possible, to talk to people about them, because chances are that some of your friends will have had experiences like these, and just talking to others and sharing them. And so I see derealization, depersonalization as the beginning of what you might call a spiritual quest. And that's putting a positive spin on it, but to me that's kind of the point of being alive, is trying to understand yourself and understand the world. And I think these peculiar feelings can be the beginning of that journey.